those annoying wannabe YouTubers. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another crazy video!
The Cinnamon Challenge!
Let's go! Are you getting this? It can get tiring to watch him go about his shenanigans in the pursuit of viral fame. So when he knocked on my door the other day, he told me he was going away for a few weeks and asked that I get his mail. Honestly, it was a relief. I was afraid his stunts would wind up bleeding over into my life. Things were pretty normal for the first couple of days. He received a few bills, a bit of spam, and from what I could assume was a birthday card. And then, one evening, I got home to find a cardboard box waiting on his front porch, and in big letters was written, "Return to sender." Now I'm no small fry, but I admit I had trouble lifting the box on my own. It was really freaking heavy. Getting it across the road to my house was even harder. I decided I'd leave his package in my garage. It wasn't like I kept my car in there. It was because my garage door refused to open without a good thug and a whack. It was when I kicked the door again when I walked in that I lost my grip on the package and it fell to the ground and I heard a light crack inside. Shit. I hope I hadn't broken anything important, but figured I just wouldn't tell my neighbor about it and let him assume that the break happened en route. I dragged the box the rest of the way, setting it in the corner for whenever my neighbor would come back to claim it. And then I forgot all about it. Until a few days passed, that is. There was a horrible smell in my garage coming from the box in the corner. I remember thinking it must have been one of those meat of the month subscription boxes and thought it must have gone rancid from being left out for so long. I covered my nose as I approached the box with a pair of scissors in my hands. I probably wouldn't even have needed them to open it, as it had become soggy enough at the bottom to poke through with a finger. My scissors tore through the tape along the top of the cardboard box. I thought the smell couldn't get any worse, but as I flipped the flaps open, I discovered a whole new stink. I had a garbage bag in one hand and the strongest cleaner I could find in the other, and I had long rubber gloves on to keep my skin from having to touch what was inside. But as it turns out, I needed none of those things. You see, there was meat in that box, but it didn't come from a cow or a pig. No, it was worse than that. It was my neighbor, dead. Still in one piece, but dead. I caught the cops and they took me in for interrogation. It's kind of hard not to suspect the man with the corpse in his garage after all. Thankfully, they soon realized I wasn't involved. My DNA might have been all over that box. The smell might have left a mark throughout my house, but there was one piece of irrefutable evidence in my neighbor's own hands that proved my innocence. A vlogging camera. They showed me the footage only once. My neighbor was sitting in the box outside of a shipping facility, laughing as he told the world how he was going to mail himself across state lines. He brought pee bottles, food, a pillow, and a few flashlights. His friend, a guy I'd seen at his place several times to help with his stunts, closed the lid and presumably dropped him off the shipment. Throughout the next couple of hours, or days, I'm honestly not sure, my neighbor recorded a few short clips of his progress. Hey, what's up guys? I think I'm in a truck right now. I can feel it moving. Must be in a warehouse. Ooh, it's pretty warm in here. And then, on the last entry, the box toppled over. He broke his neck, and that was it. The camera recorded until either the memory card got too full or the battery had died. There's one thing I didn't tell the police after they showed me the video. One thing I heard in the footage that will haunt me until the day I die. Just after the tumble that broke his neck, I heard the familiar screeching sound of my garage door.
This past Monday, Susan and her coworkers returned to their hotel from a day of working out in the field. Rebecca and Susan stood outside their rooms. She opened hers and saw someone in the bathroom. Hello? Nobody answered. Her first instinct was that it was a cleaning lady in there. And then she saw her bag and her clothes in the woman's hand. "What are you doing with my stuff? What are you doing with my stuff?" she said. The lady kept mumbling about how her key still worked and that's how she got in. Susan was in shock and the woman was obviously very flustered, having been caught mid-robbery. She dropped the bags and fumbled around with her purse and a white plastic bag. By this time, Rebecca was behind her watching all the insanity unfold. The woman was scrambling and walking towards the door and Susan said, "What's in the bag?" No, it's just my things. It's just my things. I'll show you." Susan looked and didn't see anything of hers inside, so she let her leave. She went into her room and it's been ransacked. All of her electronics were still there. Then she went into the bathroom and saw her underwear, her bikini, and clothes shoved into her own bags randomly. Even a passport was shoved in there. Then Susan looked in the drawers and saw that she got into her medication. She ran out the door to go find her. She went down to the laundry room and out to the sides of the hotel and didn't see her anywhere. Susan realized she was never going to find her, so she and her coworker went to the lobby to tell them what happened and then called the police. They went back up to the room to wait and noticed that there was a metal bat near the bed, but there's also a flashlight on the end. The police got there and took their statements and looked around the room as well. One thing Susan noticed was that there were bits of drywall in the sink, and she pointed it out to the cops, but none of them really knew where it came from. They started looking at the door to see if she pried her way in somehow, but there was nothing. They just kind of went with the idea that she had a spare key or something, even though the hotel front desk was adamant that there's no way that could be. The officer that came called for another because they thought the woman might still be in the vicinity. But after Susan and her coworker's statements were taken, there was nothing else they could really do, so they left. Susan sat down to finally make some calls to tell people, and as she's on the phone, she's thinking about the drywall in the sink, and it still didn't make any sense to her. She goes into the bathroom and looks at the drywall in the mirror close to it, and then it hit her. She got Rebecca to help pull at this mirror on the wall, and it turns out it was attached on the top. There was a hole there, just big enough for a desperate junkie to squeeze through. She asked if she could call the cops again to let them know what they just found, and her boss said that there were still 2 cop cars in the parking lot. They both went back up, looked at the hole, and found a pillow, blankets, cigarettes, clothes, and toothbrushes inside. This woman had been living in the wall behind her mirror for God knows how long. She had access to Susan's room at all times, and the crawl space was just big enough for her to squeeze through. They took pictures of the scene and everyone was mind blown that this was actually real. Unsurprisingly, Susan and Rebecca packed up and left immediately. The hole in the walls were from a renovation and the hotel hadn't properly patched them, so they just covered it up with mirrors. She could have been hanging out in people's rooms while they were gone. Susan never went back to that hotel, but every time she travels and stays at another, you can bet the first thing she checks are the walls and the mirrors.
I was 15. I was at my boyfriend's house and it was about 10:30 p.m. We were sitting on his trampoline in his backyard, which faces a small park behind his house. His yard is on a ground level, about a meter above the ground level the park is on, and his fence is on that lower level. So by sitting on the trampoline, we could see out into the darkness of the park, which was just slightly illuminated by his yard lights. We're talking when suddenly I feel an eerie chill, like we're being watched, like something wants us to know we're being watched. I remember glancing all over the place and jumping at the smallest sounds of the night. My boyfriend was laughing at me, and all before he suddenly stilled and rose up onto his knees to look at something in the park.
Hey, there's a man watching us from that tree over there.
Those words still chill me to the core. I froze and asked him to tell me what he was doing. He told me that the man was very tall, almost halfway up the tree, which was a large eucalyptus, and that only his head and shoulder were really visible, and that his eyes were glowing or reflecting the light from his yard lights. I wondered if he was lying and making fun of me again for being paranoid earlier, so I sat up and leaned over him to see the thing next to him, when suddenly I feel an eerie chill, like we're being watched, like something wants us to know we're being watched. I remember glancing all over the place and jumping at the smallest sounds of the night. My boyfriend was laughing at me, and all before he suddenly stilled and rose up onto his knees to look at something in the park.
Hey, there's a man watching us from that tree over there.
Those words still chill me to the core. I froze and asked him to tell me what he was doing. He told me that the man was very tall, almost halfway up the tree, which was a large eucalyptus, and that only his head and shoulder were really visible, and that his eyes were glowing or reflecting the light from his yard lights. I wondered if he was lying and making fun of me again for being paranoid earlier, so I sat up and leaned over him to see the thing next to the tree. There it was. It was tall and darker than the shadows of the trees, and wasn't lit up like the trees were from the lights. Its eyes were shining brightly, and it was exceptionally tall. It couldn't be a man, if not for the shoulder and arm draped over the tree, and so it wasn't an animal either. I fell back onto the trampoline, and my boyfriend told me to be quiet and to start moving back towards the house. It was moving towards us. I shook my head. I didn't want to move. I couldn't even bring myself to move. I was frozen in fear or something. I don't know, but I remember he had to force me up, swearing loudly and telling me he was nearly at the fence. I got up and caught a glance of a figure nearly across the short distance from the trees to his yard, and I booked it to the stairs up to his front door. I glanced back to look again, and my boyfriend yelled at me not to, and that he was climbing over the fence. And I somehow moved even faster and made it to the door without tripping up the stairs and breaking a leg. He told me again it had been trying to climb over the fence when I slowed down to take a look. His family is very religious, and his father swears it was a demon trying to test their faith or something, but I don't think it was. I had another encounter maybe a month later. My boyfriend told me that a figure was watching me from exposed ceiling beams of my old barn-like house during a FaceTime call late at night. Maybe a shadow man. Maybe an Australian version of a skinwalker. I'm not really sure, and I'm 19 now, and I still can't stop thinking about what happened.
When I was 7, I had a really scary experience that I will never forget. I got up at 8 a.m., as usual, but as I stood up, I noticed something was different. It was very cold, and I felt like someone was watching me. When I turned to my sister's bed, she woke up, and I screamed. 2 heads hovered in the air, one of an older woman with long, dark hair and green eyes, the other of a bald older man with blue eyes. I screamed again and ran to my mother. I told her what happened and saw some man at the door. I can't recall what he looked like, but I screamed and hugged my mother when I saw him. I was crying at this point, and she looked at me as I pointed to the door, not explaining why. She instantly knew what I was upset about, and she spoke in the direction of the door. I don't know what she said. I was just too scared to listen, and all I wanted was to be somewhere else. Nothing like this happened to me again, until I was 13. I was coming from my friend's house and was really tired. I went to my room, turned the lights off, and went to bed. At 4 a.m., I suddenly woke up without a reason. When I looked at the door, I saw my mother looking at my sister. She had lifeless eyes, which reminded me of the incident that happened when I was 7 years old. The heads had the same lifeless eyes as my mother, except her eyes were red and just looked evil. I knew it wasn't my mom. I hid under the blanket, praying that the thing would just go away. When I looked up, it was still there. I prayed again. Then it vanished. I mean, literally vanished. I saw it with my own eyes. That thing grew fainter and fainter until I couldn't see it anymore. When it was gone, I ran to my parents and explained what happened. They believed me and said that if I couldn't go to sleep, I could watch TV or just stay up. I thanked them and went to the living room. Now, I'm 14, and I talked to my mother about the incident that happened 7 years ago. And when I told her what the heads looked like, she seemed very surprised and confused. When I asked her what was wrong, she told me that the description I gave perfectly matched that of my dead grandparents. I don't know if they were really my grandparents, or who that man on the door was.
This story happened when I was in the 9th grade. I was going home after being at my friend's apartment. He's one of my good friends, so I often visited him. It was about 9 p.m. at night. Usually I went home at 5 or 6 when I visited him, but it was final exam week, so I went home later than usual to prepare for it together. He lives on the 15th floor. I took the freight elevator down because it was quicker than the passenger elevator. The elevator is kind of old, shaky, and not really well maintained. The fan isn't working, the walls are rusty, full of graffiti, and the light flickers, as you would expect from an old building's elevator. At the moment, there were 3 or 4 people with me going down to the lobby. The elevator went down normally. Then, suddenly, at the 9th floor, the door opened. I saw one of my other friends. Her name is Billy. She was playing, laughing with some kids who I assumed to be her friends. Then she looked at me and smiled. I stared at her for a moment, but I didn't reply to her because, well, we're not that close. Nothing came to mind to say. So the elevator closed back up and took me to the lobby. But soon, I realized that no one that was on the elevator with me seemed to notice those kids, despite the loud laughter they made. But once again, I didn't care about it, so I went back home and rested. The day after, I saw Billy again. Out of curiosity, I asked her, "Hey, why were you playing so late at night? Why didn't you stay at home?" She looked confused, as if I was asking her a random question. She then asked me, "Well, what do you mean? I didn't go anywhere yesterday. I was at my house." I was a bit confused, and I couldn't believe what she just said. She then asked me again, "Well, what was I wearing yesterday?" I answered, "You wore a white t-shirt, right?" I was hoping that she would say yes, but she said no. I felt my heart dropping. If it wasn't her that I saw last night, then who? A few days later, as usual, I was visiting my friend, and went home late again. I waved goodbye to him as I was walking the corridor. One thing came to mind. How am I going to get down? Remembering those elevator things, I took the stairs. Well, I guess it wasn't a really good decision, but at least better than that scary elevator. I walked down the dark stairwell. Once in a while, I looked at the open part, and this time, I saw a shadow figure looking out from the balcony across. It seemed normal to me, probably a person looking down, so I kept on walking. Watching my step, I looked back up again, and suddenly, the shadow figure thing disappeared into nowhere. in just a blink of an eye. I was so scared, thinking about how the hell did that guy disappear that quickly? By jumping down the balcony? My steps went quicker, but to my astonishment, I saw the sign 8th floor, which means I saw that figure when I was on the 9th floor. That same floor that I witnessed the ghost Billy. Soon I called my friend and told him about it. He was surprised and told me that a lot of people also said that the 9th floor is actually haunted. There was once a guy that died there, but was found rotting in his apartment room 3 days later.